Hello, everybody. I am Drew Duncan. Do not forget that Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan Radio. Additionally, you can find me on YouTube. Simply look for Drew Duncan Radio. Patreon is Drew Duncan Radio as well, and I am wherever you're listening to podcasts. Simply tell your device to play Drew Duncan on Apple, Deezer, Spreaker, anywhere you're listening to podcasts. I am there, and if you want, you can always check for the link in the description. Chiefs, Texans, rematch. Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, offensive firepower. The Texans with maybe the best comeback we saw, right, with the Buffalo Bills. They also did it against the Kansas City Chiefs earlier this season. And mind you, in that initial football game, Deshaun Watson had 2 interceptions. And Kansas City was up, 17-3 at the end of the first quarter, if I remember correctly. So what I'm looking for from Kansas City, yet again, can they play a full 4-quarter game of football? We have seen them, since really Andy Reid has been their coach, play so sporadically. We have seen them dominate teams in the playoffs, like the Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans, and yet lose those football games. We've seen it in the regular season. When I have talked about this football team at the beginning of the year, one of the things that I discussed that has been a huge concern of mine is that they'll have these great leads, or they'll play like a really great quarter, and then that's really about it. And sometimes that one great quarter is enough to finish football games. But that wasn't the case against the Houston Texans, though, was it? Look, the Kansas City Chiefs have this thing for some reason where they'll look like the best team in the NFL, and then all of a sudden they look exceptionally mediocre. The play calling is immaculate. The timing is there. The execution is perfection. You've got Mahomes running all over the place. You've got targets that he could throw to at any given moment. And then all of a sudden, they hit a bump. And one of the big weaknesses for the Kansas City Chiefs is no running game. I mean, they really can't run the football all that great. And when you think about what they've been missing ever since Kareem Hunt had to lead this football team, the difference has been exceptionally noticeable. You know, I've always been a guy that's about the running game, and I know that if you're listening, you went, oh, well, you just did that whole thing with, the 49ers and Vikings about who's going to be the better quarterback, but I think that's because the defenses are going to be ready for their running games. That's why. You're going to have to actually be a quarterback in that game. This is different. Neither one of these defenses are exceptionally phenomenal. You don't look and point at any one of these football teams and go, man, I'll tell you what, that's a defense that can carry the championship. I mean, that's been a topic of discussion for the Kansas City Chiefs now the last 2 years, really. See, when they had a really good defense, offensively, they weren't that good. Now that they have a really good offense, defensively, they're not there. And Chris Jones has been listed as questionable, if I remember correctly, for this football game. So that's just another miss for the Kansas City Chiefs. Meanwhile, on the other side of the football, the Texans, how good defensively did they really look when the last game that they did is against the Buffalo Bills? I mean, I know I didn't wake up on the morning of that football game and go, Houston's got to watch out. They're playing one of the best offenses in the NFL, the Buffalo Bills. They just did a couple of gadget things. It worked out for them, and Houston just kind of stuck with it. Neither one of these teams have really the greatest offensive lines in the NFL. Neither one of these teams have really the best running games in the NFL. I mean, it really is Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes slinging it all over the football field. That is the entire makeup of these two teams. So you know what I would do? I would run a lot of draw plays. I would run some option plays. I'm talking straight up speed option plays. Both Mahomes and Deshaun Watson have the capability. You could run some quarterback power plays, kind of like what we see with the Baltimore Ravens or a lot of teams at the collegiate level, right? You could start mixing some of those things in, and I know that you don't want to get your quarterback hurt, and I know that you don't want to put too much pressure on your quarterback, and I know Kansas City Chief fan and Houston Texan fan is both going to jump me and go, but man, these guys have been hurt because their lines are so terrible. Mahomes had two injuries this season. He had the ankle and the knee. But at what point, though, do you just throw up your hands and go, we've got to do something to get some balance? I mean, at this point of the year, it's really all about trusting who your guys are. And I think for both of these football teams, as much as I love Hopkins at wideout for the Houston Texans, and as much as I love this overall core that Patrick Mahomes has, I think it's going to be really on both of these quarterbacks to do everything for their football teams, but you can take some pressure off of them with running some draw plays. And I'm not talking on 2nd and 10, right? The old 49ers thing from the 80s. I'm talking about first down. And I'm talking about doing it from under center. Disguise it. I would run some 3-step drop plays from under center, and then I would run some draw plays. And I would make the focus on my running back. I would even fake some draw plays. I would take the time to fake draw plays. I know that it is a huge risk with how horrendous both of these offensive lines are, but, you've got to really step outside of the box right now. And maybe you'll catch them looking in the backfield on some zone coverages. Maybe you'll catch them one-on-one. Maybe you will catch them slipping, and you'll be able to make a play off of like a fake draw play. It's all about creating the anticipation of the defense, right? That's what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about making the defense anticipate the opposite of what you're giving them. Throw in the same look over and over and over. Make them numb to what is going on. In the same way that the Seattle Seahawks are so publicized for how they come back in a lot of these football games, we're seeing a lot of that from Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans as well. This game is probably going to have some turnovers. We're going to see some interceptions. I think that there's going to have to be a lot of capitalizing on those. And, I honestly, I'm going to do what I can to try and stop the other team's offense. And if I can, I'm hoping that my special teams puts me right around midfield, 40-yard line. I mean, I need to be in good field position to maybe try and run the football at least a little bit so that way I can create some opportunities for my team to control the clock a little bit and still be in very good scoring position. I can, make the decision to maybe go for it on 4th and short. Those types of things, because when you're on your own 40-yard line and back, that's a huge gamble. Right around midfield, they're 40, they're 35. I'm not going to win this game kicking field goals. I'm going to win it scoring touchdowns, right? So I'm going to go for it on 4th and 1 from the get-go. And I need my special teams and my defense to put me in that position so that way I can control the game flow from the beginning. And honestly, I don't think either one of these teams need to run a lot of trick plays. I think it was Howard Schnellenberger that said that when teams do that, he always felt like that meant that they couldn't beat them straight up. And we saw that with the Buffalo Bills, right? They did that thing with Allen, and it was a great play. It was exciting to watch. But what was the end result of that football game? Once Allen had to be a quarterback, he couldn't get it done. And both of these guys are very capable of being that quarterback, but I just don't know any other way really that you could take the pressure off of them other than running these draw plays, these fake draw plays, these quarterback power plays. I know it seems ridiculous to say that run a quarterback play and take the pressure off of them, because the threat of the run in some way or another needs to be there to keep these defenses honest enough so that way you can hit some big plays. Guys, I am Drew Duncan. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan Radio. YouTube and Patreon is at Drew Duncan Radio. I am wherever you are listening to podcasts. Check the description for the links to my podcast, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, etc. I am there. And as always, don't you dare touch that dial.